In the last section, we updated the number of threads that are created inside of our thread pool and observed what actually occurred. In this section, we're going to address a couple of questions you've probably got around the existence of this thread pool. So I'm going to pull up a couple of questions and we're going to go through each one. Here we go. Okay, so on the left-hand side, we've got a question, and on the right-hand side, a possible answer. So the first question you probably have, and this is probably the most obvious one, can we use the thread pool for our own personal JavaScript code? Or can only certain Node.js functions, like the PBK df2 function, make access to it? And the answer to that is that you and I can write JavaScript code that makes use of that thread pool. And we'll see exactly how to do that later on in a couple of videos. So yes, we'll figure out how we can run our own JavaScript code in separate threads. The second question you might have is, what functions inside the Node standard library actually make use of it? So this one is a little bit more complicated, and I cannot give you a very distinct answer of exactly which functions are executed inside that thread pool and which are not. And the reason for that is that a lot of it depends on what operating system you are on. So depending on whether or not you are on Windows or a Unix-based system, you're going to see different functions getting access to the thread pool. Now, the one common thread is that all of the file system module functions, like every function inside the file system, makes use of the thread pool, no matter what operating system you're running. Now, the final question you might have here is, how does the thread pool stuff actually fit into the event loop? Remember, we wrote out some kind of like test code a little bit ago, or pseudocode, to simulate how the event loop works. You might be curious, what presence does this thread pool have in all that pseudocode that we wrote? Well, you might remember that we had that pending operations array back inside of our pseudocode example. So here's our thread pool thing. And at the very top, we had defined that pending operations array right here. And then any time that we wanted to check to see if our event loop should continue running, we checked to see if there were any pending operations left inside that thread pool. So this pending operations thing right here essentially represents code that is being executed or tasks that is being executed inside the thread pool. So long as that thread pool still has some code inside of it or some tasks lined up for it to run, our program is going to continue to execute the event loop. And then you might recall that inside the event loop itself, at step number 2 right here, we had said that Node looks at the pending operations array and it calls any relevant callbacks. So after we finish calculating one of our hash values inside of one of those threads, the callback that we had registered with the PBK df2 function is then executed when we go through step number 2 right here. So that's how everything kind of relates back to the event loop. Okay, so now we got some of these probably common questions out of the way. Let's continue in the next section, and we're going to start to dig into that other array that we have not spoken about. Remember up here, we also had that pending OS tasks thing. So quick break, and we'll start to dive into what this array up here meant as well. So I'll see you in just a minute.